Most of these things I don't wanna say.
It was 1963 when I was murdered. Mirina, my sister Allie, and my father and mom had to move since my dad lost his job at the factory. We bought a small house in the village, which was in the countryside near my dad's new job. But the street we had moved into was filled with rumors about people getting murdered mysteriously. The killer remained unknown. Of course, I never believed those rumors and made sure my little sister never heard of them. But as the nights went by, something weird had happened to my neighbor who had lived in front of my house. Every night, exactly at midnight, she had left her house and wandered into the woods with an axe in her hands. I didn't think much of it, but it was just kind of weird seeing her acting like this. After that night, I walked to my nearest newspaper stop and overheard some elderly women talking about some young boy named Felix going missing. They said he had been last seen walking into the same woods that my weird neighbor keeps going every midnight. But I didn't dare to say a word. I just listened. Previously on 1963, it was 1963 when I was murdered. We bought a small house in the village, but the street we had moved into was filled with rumors about people getting murdered mysteriously exactly at midnight. She had left her house and wandered into the woods with an axe in her hands. I overheard some elderly women talking about some young boy named Felix going missing. They said he had been last seen walking into the same woods that my weird neighbor keeps going every midnight. I hope today goes better, and I really hope that poor boy gets found. But anyway, my mom is baking cupcakes for me to take them to our weird neighbor. I know I probably shouldn't say it like that, but she is weird. I took the cupcakes and made my way over to her house. I knocked maybe 3 times, and no one had opened the door. That's weird. Did she not make it home? Is she also missing? I quickly shook off my thoughts and ran back home. As I got back into my room, I heard my mom talking to someone in the living room. I couldn't see who it was, but the talk sounded serious. My mom got up and yelled at the man as she left and drove off without saying a word to me. I got curious, so I took my skateboard and went after her. But minutes after, I saw the police storming over to my street. I turned back and ran back home. The police had stopped at my neighbor's house. Before I could reach them, they drove off to the woods. With a head full of thoughts, I walked back home, just wondering of what had happened to my weird neighbor. 1963. I stayed up all night, just talking to myself, trying to put up all the pieces together, but nothing was sticking. I was really worried about my neighbor, so I decided to do a little investigation. I wonder, what did the police see at my neighbor's house that it made them search the woods? I grabbed my backpack and a flashlight, then quietly tiptoed downstairs, trying to not wake my sister or my parents. As I got out, it was pitch black. I walked towards her house, and I stood there for a whole minute, wondering if I should enter or no. Am I committing a crime? But I just couldn't resist and tried to open the door. It was unlocked to my surprise. I walked in with fear in my eyes. I didn't dare to turn on the light. just in case someone might see me breaking in and calls the police. I walked towards the nicely built kitchen. I flashed around till I saw a note stuck on the fridge. It said, "I have to finish my task. Don't look for me." That's insanely weird. What task? What could she possibly had to do in the woods? Did she kidnap the little boy? At that moment, I was getting really scared, and a couple of seconds later, I heard footsteps. My hands started shaking, and I hid behind the counter with tears in my eyes. Then suddenly, I heard a little girl's voice say,
"Rena, is that you?"
I instantly recognized that voice. It was my little sister, Ali. I quickly rushed to her, grabbed her hand, and ran back home. That night was unforgettable. I had to explain to my sister what I was doing there, this late, but of course to not scare her. I just said I was worried, so I checked on our neighbor, that's all. She had promised me to not tell our parents, so I got her in bed and sat at the desk just talking with my thoughts once again. 1963. After the long night, the sun had finally raised from its sheets. I stretched and walked downstairs. As I stepped down, my eyes widened, and I gasped. My neighbor was sitting in the living room drinking tea with my mother. But how is this possible? Didn't she go missing? I glared at her weirdly, and she caught my looks and said,
"Oh, hello, little one."
As I was still in shock, I said in my stuttering voice, "Hello, Mrs."
"Call me Mary, sweetheart."
And she gave me a smile, then continued talking to my mom. I couldn't hold myself and said, "May I ask you a question, Mary?" She looked at me and said,
"Of course, dear. Anything."
I stood there and just went for it. "Where have you been for the past few days?" I stood there as I waited for an answer awkwardly. She had responded,
"Oh, dear. I was visiting my family and, of course, my grandchildren. They're going through a quite rough time."
I was just full of questions. So I just went on and asked her another question. I said, "I'm sorry if this sounds weird, but what are you doing at the woods each night?" She had said once again.
"Oh, no worries, dear. Well, I got insomnia, which causes me troubles to sleep. So we could say. I'm full of energy like a young child. I walk to the woods to cut up some fresh wood. Since my family lives in the city, it's kind of difficult for them to get wood, so I chop it up for them."
I stood there and listened to her. I thanked her for answering my questions, then made my way back to my room. As the night time set it once again, I noticed Mary going off to the woods again. I just was so curious, and I followed her. At one moment as we walked in the woods, I lost sight of her, and I kind of got scared, so I yelled out, "Mary." I walked for a bit and heard screams. I quickly ran over to the sound, and I saw Felix, with Mary's axe in his hands, covered in blood. I was shaking in fear. As I tried backing away from the scene, I stepped on a branch. Felix turned back and he saw me, his face covered in blood. He started chasing me. 1963. I remember looking around the room. Then I was tied up in some basement. I could hear Felix washing his hands after he killed Mary. He then walked up to me with a pistol in his hands, as he was threatening me if I yelled or said anything I'd end up like Mary. He then started killing more and more victims, then dragging them in his basement to rot. The only reason why he kept me alive was so I would clean after his dirty work was done. One of the other reasons was for me to cook for him. I was like his slave. But of course I was planning something all along. Days after days had passed. It felt like years had gone by. As the time went by, I found out some shocking stuff about Felix. One being that he is not a young boy. Just seemed like one based on his height and face structure. But he's a grown-up criminal. He tried to get me involved into his crimes. But of course I was refusing until he started showing aggression and force. He had cut my hair, and then decided to dye it a different color. Everything felt like torture. I was getting sick of this lifestyle, so I decided to try and escape once Felix leaves for his next victim. Then I don't remember what happened. '63 was the time when the mysterious murder got exposed by my older sister, Rena. That's the end of her story.
Like a glimpse from the past, dark in the frame, you're the poster on the wall. My dreams, you the prince, and I'm like, oh, fairy tales, I'm not used to it. Oh, got me questioning what it's done to me. Used to be out of reach. Feel like you're testing me, you're the necessity. Full court press on me. Don't fuck me up, don't let me down. You know I wanna be around. You tugging more and with my heart. Didn't think we ever be so hard. Crazy, I'm letting down my guard. Don't fuck me up, don't let me down.